the point is, and I think one of the things, if you say, well, why did I go a different path? It was very early on, I was convinced that the way I would put it is Goethe was right. Goethe was, in a sense, the predecessor of Rudolf Steiner and the founder of anthroposophy. And he said two things which I think are relevant here. Number one, never start with theories, always start with observations. Mm-hmm. And number two, how do you know that if you want to understand a living thing, you should use a microscope and not a macroscope? Mm. Now, we assume that, okay, I want to know about whether this person is healthy, I should, first kill them and then cut them up and see what's in there. Right? And we all accept that as if, God himself said that's how you understand life is A, kill it, B, cut it up and poison it. And it's not necessarily true that that's right. Why don't you understand how this dolphin, interacts with its environment? Like maybe somebody poisoned the water. Mm-hmm. Right?
I was just reading an article from Scotland where the fish farmers have dumped 12 tons of formaldehyde into the lake to, I guess, sterilize their fish, maybe to get rid of sea lice or something like that.
Or get rid of the coronavirus.
Oh, maybe the coronavirus. 12 tons of formaldehyde. And they were saying, oh, it dissolves in water. It's not a problem.
Right. I mean, after all, if a goat and a pawpaw fruit can test it,
yes,
why not a bunch of fish? I mean, right. So those two things guide me. Number one, I don't believe in anything because there's a theory that we're supposed to accept as true.
Right.
The whole of Western science seems to have become, we believe in the germ theory, therefore we're going to spend, hundreds of trillions of dollars trying to prove it. Or we believe, another one of mine, that the heart pumps the blood, which clearly it doesn't. And then they spend billions of dollars with theories of trying to prove that. But the problem is, simple observations and trusting one's own judgment just don't bear that out. And we're all screwed up.
From a macroscopic point of view, like if you step back and you're hundreds of feet in the air looking down at this tribe or this village where people, have perfect teeth and eat, a really good diet, it's also more than their diet, right? It's like, what is their lifestyle? And many other aspects of it. Like, what's their level of stress? Is this a warlike group of people, or is this people who are living in somewhat more harmony with other people and with the environment?
Right. And the way they think, we come at this with theories that, oh no, your health can't possibly relate it to be how you think, or your work, or whether you use money, or whether you have to get on the subway, or whether your water is full of, 164 different toxins. The point of it is, why are all these things excluded without any evidence? I mean, and I'm not saying that, people who believe in the germ theory or any other theory, that by definition makes them sick. But on the other hand, I don't know that it isn't the case either. And that to me is what investigation or actual science should be about. Just, what do you see? Now, it may be that it's people who, are warlike, have rotten teeth. I mean, I don't know that. And I don't know that it's not either. So I don't think we should do science. I mean, that was Goethe's whole point. Just stick with the facts, trust yourself, trust your observations, and not only that, but practice observation. And he actually taught people how to practice, and I was very specifically, trained by some people in how to observe and how to ask questions. And so I've been doing that for 40 years. And
that's
most
important.
aren't very good at it. They don't.
Yeah, as a botanist, one of the things I would walk across a hill for exercise or something, and I think, right now I'm seeing 2 or 3 different kinds of plants, but I know that if I get down on my hands and knees and I start writing down, what's actually out there, the mosses, the lichens, the little flowers, the different kinds of trees and bushes, that I might be able to come up with 100 different plants that are actually on the hill. But when we walk across the hill, we just see a bunch of green stuff. We see a bunch of trees and a bunch of bushes and a bunch of grass. And we don't realize it's actually a very rich environment. We just walk right through it. And the natural environment is far richer, actually, if you look at it, than a city environment.
Right.
I mean, I've observed in big cities like Boston or New York, it seems to especially be on the East Coast, that some people seem to, behave like they're excessively stressed, right? They're not behaving by what I would call normally.
Yeah, everybody, basically. Not everybody, but a lot of people.
Yes. I mean, I think a lot of people deal with stress.
Normal now.
Yeah, it's only worse now. I mean, it's bad enough having, a low-paying job and, maybe working 2 or 3 jobs and trying to deal with all kinds of social and family problems. And now you don't have a job. And you still got all the same problems, but now you got the stress of, when am I going to work again? When am I going to start seeing some money come in?
And you have to breathe in your own exhaust, which...
Yeah, with the masks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just reading...
I just wanted to say that it's interesting when you look at this, what we're talking about, and the change in how we prove viral causation. It went from basically observation, right? That's what Koch's postulates are, or Rivers' criteria. And then if you read the new public health version of how to prove viral causation, I think they're called the Hill criteria or something.
Right.
One of the criteria is you have a bunch of people being sick and you can't think of another reason.
And you deliberately don't. It's like Zika was a perfect example of this. There was a paper published in New England Journal of Medicine, I think, which was actually planted by the CDC. Like when I looked at the authors, they all worked for the CDC. And it said, we're going to prove Zika causation. And there was a statement in there that, we considered all other possible causes, but they didn't list them. So I was thinking, did you consider all the vaccine programs that are going on in Brazil? Did you consider the fact that you're adding pesticides to the water supply to kill larvae? Did you consider the agricultural pesticides that are used heavily in that area? And I'm sure they didn't. And that's why they didn't list the list of causes, potential causes, because they actually omitted all the environmental causes.
Right. Or what if the person is just stupid and they can't think of any causes? I mean, that's like, you can't, that's what I mean. So that's a person or a theory that doesn't go from observation, like you said. So what about this? What about this? What do I observe here? Are people spraying this or injecting that or whatever, and that's not to say that I necessarily know that any one of those is the cause, right? That's what we're supposed to find out. But
this CDC's aim is find the virus that best fits. I mean, it's kind of like doing a jigsaw puzzle, and there's a couple of be mixed up, and you're missing a piece, and so you just ram a piece in that doesn't really fit, but it's good enough to serve the end of saying we found another virus. Right,
exactly. They just use, they start with a theory and then they try to fit in facts, which do or don't, and then, I was just talking to the head of this lab the other day that specializes in testing, coronavirus testing.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to just play dumb just for fun, although I must admit it wasn't much fun. But anyway, she says, it's an example of this. I said, so how do you do this testing? They said, well, we do a PCR test, and that looks for the virus. And I said, does the PCR test mean that they're sick? Well, it means that they have the virus. They might be sick or they might not be sick. And I said, well, how do you know if the virus is causing them to be sick? And she said, you do a PCR test. And I said, wait a minute. Are you the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland?
I was quoting Alice in Wonderland quite a bit at the beginning of this, because it's like I had no other explanation for this kind of world that we live in, where there's all this circular reasoning and people don't realize that it's circular, or people are doing insane things.
Right. But David, let me suggest something about that, because I was thinking about talking to you, and I was let me just be frank here. I was saying, I hope he doesn't ask me about like antibody tests or things, because obviously you know more about that than I do. But I mean, I've read all your things, and I could probably spout it off if I needed to. But here's what I wanted to get to, where I think I can contribute. Okay, can I just?
Yeah.
So here I am. I'm writing this chapter about how they actually quote found the virus, which means how they didn't find the virus, or how they do the tests.
Right.
I mean, it's all just complete craziness. And so I write this, spent 4 hours writing it. Then I talked to my friend, and I said, I had this funny feeling as I was writing this, because it was so completely obvious that the whole thing is a sham, and if you just use basic logic, you come to a completely different conclusion. And yet, because it was so obvious, even me, after 40 years, the occasional thought came into my mind, I must be wrong.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How can everybody else be wrong? It's got to be me.
How could this be? I must be stupid, or I don't understand. This is so obvious. This is such, like, you can't say things like this quote from the head of infectious disease at Wake Forest says, an antibody test means you're either immune or you're not immune. That's right. It's like you go to buy
That's true. Well, if you cut the deck of cards and you pull out a spade, that either means you're immune or you're not immune.
Right.
It has the same predictive value.
Right. I mean, what other choice is there? Maybe you're possibly immune, or it's like a refrigerator, and the guy says, well, it'll either keep your food cold or it won't.
Yes.
Thanks.
If you want a refrigerator that works all the time, then you got to pay for the more expensive model.
Right. And so, why is that? And all I can say is we're all so conditioned that we can't possibly trust our own, insight or logic or thinking, that there must be somebody out there who knows better. There must be some wise men out there who are actually guiding the ship. And I saw an interview with Carey Mullis, and saying he went for almost a decade thinking, I don't know, I must have missed something here.
Right.
Until he was invited as a Nobel laureate to meet the other wise men. And he goes up to Montaigne and says, what's the evidence? And he said, basically, I don't have any.
Montaigne, if you get him alone, can be quite honest. Gallo, he's always the pit bull. It doesn't matter if you woke him up in the middle of the night or whatever, you're going to get the same response from Gallo. Right.
Yeah. Montaigne's done some interesting things, but he did say that, and it hit Mullis right then. I think he said to himself, hey, wait a minute, I'm one of the wise men. I don't see it. And so at that point, the whole world changes.
Yes. I mean, I guess when you get the Nobel Prize, you can put yourself up kind of on Mount Olympus of intellectual endeavors, so you don't need to feel this inferiority, which a lot of people feel because, you know, they don't have the credentials. And even if you have the credentials, you don't have the Nobel Prize to stamp it.